Welcome inside the War Room. I'm your host, Andrew Valancourt, and we're back today for episode 85 of the Dynasty War Room podcast. On today's show, we're going to do some trade reviews. So I have 15 trades that have gone down in the past several weeks across all of my many Dynasty leagues, and so I'm going to bring those to you. I've put them on Twitter to have you vote on which side is the winner. And so we're going to go through those trades and react to how those votes turned out. I have not peeked at the results yet, so we're going to explore this together and see what people think of all these various trades, as most of your leagues are either approaching a trade deadline or trade action is heating up because we're getting closer and closer to the playoffs if you don't have a trade deadline. So either way, so hopefully this will be a helpful exercise, see what's out there, what's possible for you and your leagues. And so before we jump into that, I want to remind everyone, as always, make sure you are following this podcast on your platform of choice. We're on everything out there, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, you name it, we're there. So go make sure you are following along so you don't miss any future shows. And find us on social media. We're on Twitter or X at Dynasty War Room. That's where you can vote on these polls in the future, because this is kind of a recurring episode that we do every so often. And we're on Facebook as well. Find our Facebook page, and YouTube at Dynasty War Room is the channel handle there. So go follow along. We appreciate it. And one more quick note. I've reminded you in the past about my friends at Fast Draft, a new fantasy best ball and daily fantasy sports app. Go check it out. Use my code WARROOM, all one word, WARROOM, when you deposit up to $50, and you will get a deposit match upon doing so. There have been some issues with that code over the past few weeks, which I was not aware of. Now those have been corrected. The code is updated. It's working properly. So you will now get that full $50 deposit match on Fast Draft by using code WARROOM. All right, so let's move on into the trades. So I have 15 different trades. I'm going to scroll through the results here and learn live what the results of these polls were. There's a pretty wide range of votes on each of these. It just kind of depends, where the social media algorithm takes the individual tweet. So some have more than 100 votes, some have about 20. It just depends. They're all about somewhere between 20 and 100 or so votes. I think it looks like 102 is our most voted on polls. So we'll kick things off. We'll just do it in the order in which I tweeted them out. So this trade, Sam Darnold, George Kittle, and a 2027 third-round pick traded for a 2026 first-rounder, projected to be a middle of the first-round pick, a 27 second, and another 27 second. And the voters took the picks side of the trade by a very close margin. 53% to 47% preferred the first-round pick and the 227 seconds. And I think this is a very, very even trade all the way across the board. Sam Darnold is a player that I have been pretty negative about on this show. However, he has done his best to prove me wrong during his first year here in Seattle. He's looked very good. Not so good this past week, but overall, he's been very good. He's looked, more like the QB he was in Minnesota last year than, what we saw with him at the very end of the year and obviously in his previous stops throughout the NFL. So Darnold looking like the long-term answer in Seattle, at least over the next couple of years. He signed a 3-year contract this past offseason. George Kittle, a bit of an up and down year, mostly due to injury, quarterback issues in San Francisco, but still a veteran that can be helpful. And, the third-round pick tacked on as a sweetener there. I think that essentially this boils down to getting a first for Sam Darnold and 2 seconds for George Kittle in what should be a pretty strong draft. So overall, I think this really just comes down to your status as a team. So if you are a contender, it certainly makes sense that you would prefer the Darnold-Kittle side. And if you are going to miss the playoffs or you're going to be more of a rebuilding team, then it makes all the sense in the world that you would prefer the picks. I do like that the 2 second-round picks got pushed into 2027. I do think that draft class is going to be a bit stronger. So I if I was forced to pick, I think I would take the picks. But again, that's looking at it in a vacuum. Very, very close trade. I think the fact that the poll results came out at 53-47 indicates that that's a very good trade, a very fair trade for both sides. All right, so trade number 2. And this is all, just so I can clarify this in case anyone's wondering, these are all Dynasty trades, 12-team Superflex, PPR, tight end premium scoring. That's what all 15 of these trades are from those types of leagues. So these are not redraft. These are not 10-man leagues or anything like that. Dynasty 12-team Superflex. So you're starting 2 quarterbacks. PPR scoring with an extra half point per reception for tight ends. So that's kind of the background for these moves. Now, this trade went down as more of a running back trade. Bucky Irving was traded along with Wan'Dale Robinson for Caleb Johnson, a mid to late 2027 first-round pick, a 27 second, and a 27 third. So the poll results, 66% of voters, and this was the one that had over 100 votes, 66% of voters preferred the Bucky Irving side of the deal to the picks. So obviously Caleb Johnson, unfortunately, has fallen off quite a bit from his late first-round value that he was back in May, whereas Bucky Irving, however, he still is the back to have in Tampa Bay, but he's been hurt. He's missed a lot of time. Still not sure when exactly he's going to return. But then Wan'Dale Robinson tossed in as well, has been a pretty productive player this year, especially given the Neighbors injury. So overall, this is a situation where the team acquiring Bucky Irving and Wan'Dale Robinson, they're making a playoff push, whereas the Picks and Johnson side is doing a bit of a retool, a rebuild. And so again, I think this makes a lot of sense depending on whether you're the rebuilding team versus the contending team and what side you would prefer. I tend to favor the Picks side of this deal. I think that Bucky Irving is a very good player, but still is in a bit of a crowded backfield over there in Tampa with White and Sean Tucker, who has had a couple nice games. I would imagine that Bucky Irving is going to regain, a full workload in that backfield, but it's just one of those things where, given his size, there were some general concerns about his ability to hold up over, to injury in the NFL, and he's been banged up a bit now. Running backs and just the relative, speed that they lose their jobs or they lose fantasy value. It's just one of those things where if you can get a 2027 first-round pick in what I believe will be a very good draft class, along with the second and a third and taking the flyer on Johnson, I would prefer that side. I'm just not 100% in on Bucky Irving, at least at the price tag for him. It sounds like the general population is a little bit higher on Bucky than I am. So that would explain why I would be in the minority of the voters on this one. But again, perfectly fair trade. I don't think this is unreasonable by any stretch for either side. If you had Bucky Irving, you're certainly not going to trade him for less than a first, second, and a third. And if you are, looking to rebuild, then acquiring essentially a full slate of draft picks in a strong draft class, I think, is a very good way to go. And selling high on Wan'Dale Robinson while he has the value he does with the Neighbors injury. So all in all, I think very good trade for both sides. I can see the appeal, but I'm drawn to that 27 draft class. All right, so here we go with trade number 3, and this one is Jameson Williams and DeAndre Swift for a late 2026 first-round pick. So this one went down in my home Dynasty league between a team that was in the middle of the pack and a pretty strong contender who I believe is the number 1 seed in the league right now. And the number 1 seed is the team that received Jameson Williams and DeAndre Swift. The other team has sold off all of their valuable assets. They're entering a full tank rebuild. And I think that this manager could have gotten a lot more than just a late first-round pick for both of these guys combined. Now, I will say that the caveat to this, and of course the poll results, which I'll mention in a second, this trade actually happened in mid-October, right before. Well, I don't want to say mid-October, but it happened several weeks ago, in October, before Jameson Williams had the back-to-back-to-back huge games. So it was right before that when this trade happened. So at the time, the thinking was Jameson Williams having a down season. DeAndre Swift has been solid, but again, middle-aged running back, and this guy's rebuilding. He just wants a first. You can understand why it gets done. Now, in hindsight, this already looks bad because I think Jameson Williams on his own is probably worth a late first, and DeAndre Swift, I think, is worth at least an early second, most likely. And so, to me, this feels a little bit of a light return, and the poll results reflect that. So 81% of voters took the player side with Jameson Williams and DeAndre Swift. That is the side that I would prefer as well, given that I have the benefit of looking at this present day where Jameson Williams has broken out, Sam Laporta is injured, DeAndre Swift is back from injury. So I would take the Jameson Williams, DeAndre Swift side, especially considering that the pick is likely going to be a later 4 pick in the 26 draft. All right, so let's move on into trade number 4. And this is another one from the home Dynasty League. And this one involves a pair of quarterbacks. So Jared Goff and Rachaad White were traded for Bryce Young, Kenneth Walker, Jaden Reed, and a 2027 4th-round pick. The voters, by a margin of 64% to 36%, chose the Bryce Young, Ken Walker, Jaden Reed, and the 4th-round pick side of the deal. Only 36%, took the Jared Goff side. And I have to say I disagree with the voters once more. I would be in the minority here. I would be taking the Jared Goff side of the deal. I have been on record time after time after time in my general lack of belief in Bryce Young. I mean, I'm not a believer. I don't think he's a good NFL quarterback. Albeit he did have a pretty good outing this past week for Carolina, who have been surprising in terms of their NFL record this year. They're fighting for a playoff spot, and they could even win that division, really. But Bryce Young has had a whole lot more bad games than good games. I know there is a huge age gap here between Jared Goff and Bryce Young, which I'm sure went into this trade, as the manager that acquired Bryce Young is going into a full rebuild. And so, you get the age difference there between Young and Goff, and you're taking the shot that Young is the guy that's going to get a second contract. And I don't know if that's going to happen, number one. And number two, I don't know if that's going to lead to a lot of positive fantasy performances. I just don't know that he's one of those guys that can give you a great fantasy week on a consistent basis. Sure, every now and then, every quarterback that is starting, 17 games a year is capable of that. But I very much prefer Goff to Bryce Young. And then Rachaad White has been a solid fill-in so far this year with Bucky Irving out. The team that acquired him pushing for the playoffs, that's always helpful. Kenneth Walker, I think, of course, is the other big piece in this trade. And, that's the guy that was bridging the gap between Jared Goff and Bryce Young. And he had a nice week on Sunday this past week here. And you hope, if you are a Walker manager, that that's what you continue to get. But it's been a very rough go for him in Seattle this year. A lot of split work with Zach Charbonnet. So obviously I would prefer Walker over White. But if that's the gap to get from Young to Goff, I would do it in favor of Goff. He's got a bunch of games in a dome coming up if you're worried about the rest of this year. But just from a long-term standpoint, I think that Jared Goff is locked in Detroit, whereas Bryce Young is a much bigger question mark. And Jaden Reed, another guy that I've just never really been that high on. He's kind of a part-time player. He's got injury issues. He's obviously not going to return until next year. So he doesn't really do a whole lot for me in this trade. He's not a player that I would really be that interested in. But again, if you're a rebuilding team, he's still young enough that you count on the bounce back. And so I can understand why a rebuilding team would prefer this package, certainly. And so from that aspect, I don't necessarily think this is an unfair trade. I don't think it's a bad move. I just personally, the gap between Goff and Young is so big that I'm willing to give up these other pieces in the trade to get that done. All right, so let's move on to the next trade here. And this is a big one, some big names here. So Lamar Jackson, Devonta Smith, and Woody Marks traded for Malik Neighbors, a 27 first-round pick. Don't know where that's going to be. Isaac Tesla and Jalen Milroe. So this, obviously, when you see names like Lamar Jackson, Malik Neighbors get traded, that's some big-time stuff. And getting the 27 first is big. But I do like the Lamar Jackson, Devonta Smith, Woody Marks side, and I agree with the voters on this, who went with the Lamar side by a 77 to 23% mark. And I don't think this is a bad trade. Again, I think most of the trades here that we're going to talk about, I think, are all relatively fair. But I do like the Lamar side, just getting an elite level quarterback. And not just that, if this were just Lamar Jackson in the deal for Neighbors and a first, I think that would be a pretty fair trade and a good trade where I might lean the Neighbors side. But the fact that you're getting Devonta Smith and Woody Marks along with this deal, I think has turned it into the guy that's acquiring Neighbors as giving up a little bit too much. Devonta Smith has had some ups and downs this year given the lack of a passing attack in Philadelphia, but still a good player, is very startable. And Woody Marks, rookie running back coming on, he's getting a lot of volume. I don't know that he's, going to be the next, starting running back for the next 5 years, but certainly someone that at a minimum is going to be involved in a committee moving forward, and certainly looks like the starting running back in Houston the rest of the season. So to get all three of those players for an injured Neighbors, a random 27 first, and then two, rookies that so far have not made any kind of impact, and who knows if they ever will. I'll take the elite quarterback side in a Superflex league. But I still do love Malik Neighbors, and I've mentioned my love for the 27 draft class. So it's not like I dislike the return. I think there could have been a little bit more coming back if you're going to give up Lamar Jackson. All right, now here we have the first trade that I made on this list, and I think this might be the only move of mine that we're going to talk about. Most of these have been other league mates, and I acquired running back Jalen Warren and a 27 fourth-round pick for a 2026 mid-second round pick and a 26th fourth-round pick. So essentially swapped our fourth-round picks in 26 and 27. I preferred the 27 pick, and I gave up a 26 pick for this year in return for Jalen Warren. And the voters like my side of the trade by a very slight margin, probably by one vote, because this is another 53% to 47%. So very close vote, only a couple votes difference there. And I think that signals, again, pretty fair trade. I'm a lower end playoff team, probably going to be, the 5 or the 6 seed in this league. And I had a huge hole at running back, and Jalen Warren became available. I went after him. I had an extra second-round pick to be able to use in trades, and I was able to move off of that pick and get this deal done to acquire Jalen Warren. So I'm happy with it, and I think based on the results, pretty fair move, and hopefully that can help push me into the playoffs. All right, so the next one is a huge running back trade. Bijan Robinson and Travis Etienne were traded in the Listener League, so this podcast's Listener League, the Dynasty War Room Listener League, for 3 first-round picks and a second-round pick. So 2 of those first-rounders were in 2026, so projected late and mid first-round picks, and then what, at least at this point, is projected to be a late 27 first-round pick, along with that 27 second for Bijan Robinson and Travis Etienne. So the voters went with the Bijan side, 69% to 31%. And I think I would take the Bijan side as well, simply because he's a truly elite player that I think is one of the very, very rare running backs that is going to be able to give you, 5, 6, 7 years of elite production. There's only a handful of guys that are really able to do that throughout the years. You look at the Christian McCaffreys, Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley are some of the very few names that have really been able to do that throughout the years. Zeke Elliott had a nice little stint, but looking back, if you can get more than 4 to 5 good years from a running back where you're an RB1 in fantasy, it's that's a truly special thing to have on your team. And I think Bijan's one of those guys. And so, given that, the team that acquired Bijan Robinson in this league is a big-time contender, has a very good team, and the other squad just needed to reset. And so now they reload with 3 first-round picks and a 27 second. And again, the class, I think that's a little bit better than this year. And so it works out pretty well for both sides. I don't know that the manager trading away Bijan was going to get a lot more. I think this is a very fair trade, but just given the nature that you're getting a star, I do like the Bijan side, because not to mention Travis Etienne is a quality throw-in to this deal as well. So some pretty solid running back help. I agree with the poll results that went 69% in favor of Bijan Robinson. The next one, another big-time player, a superstar getting traded in return for some big-time rookie names. And so Travis Hunter, Luther Burden, Harold Fannin, and a 27 random first-round pick traded for Justin Jefferson, Dalton Kincaid, and Zach Charbonnet. This, I think, is one of the most interesting trades on this list. The voters prefer the Justin Jefferson side with 61% of the vote. So 39% in favor of the Travis Hunter side. And I think this is a really interesting move, because the team that gave up Jefferson is obviously, doing a rebuild. They're getting 3 quality rookies and a 27 first, again, in a very good draft class, where you're giving up a mediocre tight end, a committee running back that has some upside, and then, of course, Justin Jefferson, who is a superstar, but, J.J. McCarthy has not quite lived up to the hype yet. I think it's fair to say that he's been a disappointment, and that has affected Justin Jefferson this year in his production. So I think this trade ultimately comes down to whether or not Travis Hunter becomes a star. I like the 27 first. Harold Fannin, I think, has a ton of potential. Luther Burden, I think that probably next year will be more involved in the offense, but so far hasn't done a lot. And then Travis Hunter out for the rest of the season with the injury. Unfortunately, we don't get to see what kind of improvements he was able to make throughout the year. So I can see the vision for the Hunter Burden Fannin side, but I think I have to take the Jefferson side right now, just given the the current star power, the current production. But I'm very much intrigued. And again, I think it's a fair move. But I'll take the superstar in Justin Jefferson. And this reminds me a little bit of another trade that I'm not going to talk about on this show because it went down after I had posted all these tweets. But there was a trade in a league where one manager acquired Puka Nacua for Travis Hunter, a 27 first-round pick, a 27 third-round pick, and Kyle Williams. So in that deal, I very much prefer the Puka side. But you can kind of see the similar nature of the build of that type of trade. I think that Puka is a solid tier ahead of Justin Jefferson at this point. But similar type of move. I prefer the superstar, so give me that side of the trade. All right, next up, we have a pair of running backs. Breece Hall and DeAndre Swift traded for a late 2026 first-round pick, a 26th second, and a 26th fourth. Now, this is another move where I prefer the running backs. I'll take the player side with Hall and Swift, and the voters agree. 76% voted for Hall and Swift compared to 24% for the picks. And again, a fair move, but I do like Breece Hall and DeAndre Swift. I think that this is pretty spot on in terms of value for the players. If you were to say, okay, what's Breece Hall worth? Well, probably a late first. Okay, what about DeAndre Swift? Well, a second and a fourth. I think that's pretty much exactly how this deal, shapes up. So from that perspective, I think it's a good trade for both sides, especially if the team acquiring the picks is pushing towards rebuild. But I still am a believer to an extent in Breece Hall. I don't know if he's ever going to return to the, top 3, top 5 level dynasty running back that he was, or at least thought of a couple years ago, but still can be a very productive player. Hopefully he ends up in a better offensive system either next year, or at least if he does return to New York, get a huge QB upgrade potentially. And then DeAndre Swift, lots of questions about his future in general. But at least for this year, you can certainly understand making a move for him. He's giving you solid production. And so if you're a running back needy team, I think this works out for both sides. But, having to choose, I would take the pair of runners. All right, so this trade involves some quarterbacks. And when I saw this go down in one of my leagues, I was surprised to the point where I think it was the first time that I truly realized how much people like Jackson Dart. And so this trade was Jackson Dart for Jordan Love and a 2026 second round pick. And my initial gut reaction to this deal was, oh my gosh, the second round pick is probably on the wrong side. Feels like the guy getting Jordan Love got the better end. But then I thought about it more, and, I've not been a big believer in Jordan Love. I don't love the 26 draft class. And Jackson Dart, in his limited playing time, has looked awesome. And not just through the air, but he can get you yards on the ground. And we've talked about how important it is to get fantasy quarterbacks that can run. And Jackson Dart's able to do that. So I think at this point, it makes a lot of sense to have Jackson Dart ahead of Jordan Love in dynasty rankings. I typically don't redo my entire, rankings until the off season. So I think that's probably why it kind of hit me as, whoa, the value has really jumped up for Dart. But Jordan Love has also struggled a bit this year. He's been pretty average, which I think is what he is. So chalk that up, I guess, as a win for me in terms of how I've been viewing Jordan Love. But the voters in this poll prefer Jackson Dart. They gave Dart 59% of the vote, whereas 41% went to Jordan Love. I think that's a great margin there between those two. And I would ever so slightly take the Dart side. But this is pretty much a coin flip for me, because while I am not a huge Jordan Love guy, I also tend to be someone that needs to see more from rookie quarterbacks before I declare them the next big thing. I was, a bit slow coming around on CJ Stroud, which has, worked out okay. I'm generally slow to judge rookie quarterbacks and second-year quarterbacks. I want to give them plenty of time before I really take a very strong stance on them. But Jackson Dart definitely has the upside to be an elite fantasy quarterback. And so that is the side I would take. But it feels weird saying that because of how quickly he has risen up the ranks. Next up is a trade involving another favorite of the show, Colston Loveland, along with Vikings receiver Jordan Addison for Chiefs wide receiver Rashee Rice. Now, this is one of those deals where I think you have to go Rice because it is the superstar side of the deal. I really, truly believe that Rice is a top 12, even top 10 dynasty wide receiver. He's young. He's gotten through the suspension. He's clearly Patrick Mahomes, his favorite target. And so while I love the potential with Loveland, who's had a couple nice games and had a little bit more of a breakout in recent weeks, and then Jordan Addison, who I think is a very solid, stable, flex wide receiver. But I got to take Rice. The star power is too much. And so while I think, again, it's a very fair trade, I like the Rice end, and so do the Twitter voters, who took Rashee Rice with 75% of the vote. Next up, we have some tight ends getting moved. So Tucker Kraft, yet another Dynasty War Room favorite, he was traded for Kyle Pitts, Theo Johnson, and 2 2026 third-round picks. So this was post-Kraft injury, and they wanted to go out, replace the production, and they picked up Kyle Pitts and Theo Johnson along with the pair of draft picks. And while I appreciate what this manager is trying to do by, making up that production, getting some other options to continue, pushing towards the playoffs, I do still like the Tucker Kraft side of the deal better. I just think that Kraft is an elite tight end. I think he's a top 5, top 6 tight end at the position for Dynasty, and I would love to have him on my team. I think Theo Johnson to me reminds me kind of like he's similar in tier to like a Cade Otton. I think that's kind of where his potential is. Better athlete, but just somebody that he's going to be fine. Like a Hunter Henry almost, where he's going to have some good games here and there. Certainly going to be a valuable piece long term, but I don't think he's ever going to be top 5. And then Kyle Pitts, we've gone through the roller coaster with him. Had a favorable schedule here to round out the year, but now we have quarterback problems with Michael Penix Jr. getting hurt. So I think this is a very, very fair trade, but I do prefer the Tucker Kraft side, just given that I'm a huge fan of his. And again, I prefer the side with who, in my opinion, would be the superstar. All right, so moving on to, let's see, we're pretty deep into the trades now. I lost track of where we're at. I think we're at 12, maybe the 12th trade overall, 13th trade on the list. And this one was another one from October, before Drake London got injured. In fact, this trade actually went down right after Chuba Hubbard came back to play, but it was before Rico Dowdle fully took over the backfield. And so this trade was Rico Dowdle, Rashee Rice, and a 26th fourth for Drake London and Cade Otton. So now, given what we know about Rico Dowdle and him getting, taking over that job full-time in Carolina, which was not a given at the time of this trade, I think it is understandable why people would choose that end of the deal, because Drake London, Rashee Rice, relatively similar tiered players, but now Drake London is dealing with an injury, whereas, Dowdle then, compared to Cade Otton, I think there's an edge certainly to Dowdle, but at the time this deal went down, there were a lot of unknowns. So I wanted to toss this on just to see what the reaction would be now. I know the poll results are going to be a little bit skewed given that, everyone's got new information now compared to what was there 3 to 4 weeks ago. But the voters took the Dowdle Rice fourth side with 78% of the vote, 22% to Drake London. I would be in the minority here. I am a big Drake London guy. To me, Rico Dowdle is not enough to bridge the gap here between Rice and London. Now, if this were redraft, then certainly the Dowdle Rice side would 100% be the better side of the deal. In terms of this year, the rest of the way, especially knowing that Dowdle's leading that backfield, you take the RB1 with a wide receiver one in place of one top receiver. Now, for Dynasty, though, I still like London better than Rice long term. I think we've seen that when he's healthy, he is just an unbelievable fantasy asset. He's capable of putting up 30 points every week. And Rice is a very good receiver in his own right, but he's not really the downfield type of threat compared to, Drake London. He's thriving on those lower ADOT throws. It's average depth of target. And, so elite player. I love Rashee Rice in terms of fantasy, but Drake London, I just like him more. And because of that, and Cade Otton, I've never been a big Cade Otton guy, but he's a fine bye week, tight end, and he's certainly somebody you can toss into your flex. in a tight end premium league when Tampa has injuries to their wide receivers, which has essentially been all of this year. So Otten has been quietly usable, and so I would be in the minority with the 22% taking Drake London. All right, 14th trade on the list. Kyler Murray, Arizona Cardinals quarterback, for a mid to late 2026 first-round pick. And this is a really, really tough trade because this move actually went down, I think, like 2 or 3 days before Kyler Murray got put on IR. So the manager that went out and got Kyler Murray, I'm assuming, was, made this deal because they needed a quarterback for the rest of this season. And that's not what's going to work out for them. Now, what makes this very tricky is that we don't know that Kyler Murray is going to be back in Arizona. We don't know if he's going to be a starting quarterback next year or what the situation is going to be. And I think that very much clouds, how we can view this. Because in a vacuum, I think you would take Murray 10 out of 10 times if you know, hey, he's the starting quarterback for Arizona next year. He's a mobile quarterback. He's not to his 30s yet. And so, you think, oh, this is a quarterback that still should be in his prime on a solid offense. You definitely take Murray, but the voters don't. The voters with 90% went with the first round pick. And this is where, for me, I'm going to get a little nitpicky because obviously at the time this trade went down, I thought this was a huge steal on the Kyler Murray side. Now, with the information that we know that, a few days later he's put on IR, he's out for what is likely to be the rest of the season, I think this becomes much, much, much more complicated. And I wouldn't blame anybody for taking the first round pick. I think that's certainly the safer side. But I still feel like Kyler Murray, look at what happened with Justin Fields. Justin Fields was worth a ton in Dynasty. When he was with Chicago, he was putting up huge fantasy numbers, not necessarily very good in real life, but good for fantasy. His value is, more than a first, multiple firsts. He was getting drafted in like the second round of startups. And then all of a sudden he loses his job and he's toast. But then, boom, he pops up with the Jets, gets another starting job, and all of a sudden he's being moved for late first-round picks and multiple seconds and things like that prior to the season. So quarterbacks that are mobile that get starting jobs are typically almost always going to be worth a late first. So I still tend to go with the Murray side because even if Kyler is not going to return this year, and whether or not he goes back to Arizona or he's traded, etc., he's going to start again at some point, and I would imagine he's going to be worth a late first again. So I can see this 50-50. So, this is probably the most challenging one for me because I've been a Kyler Murray guy in the past. But I still just lean the Murray side. I think you have to believe that he's going to return in Arizona. But feels really bad. If that pick was more of a mid first round pick as opposed to late, I think that's where I would prefer the middle first round pick. But the weakness in the 26 draft class, I think, has to play into the equation here. If that was a 27 first, you take the 27 first 10 times out of 10 all day long. I don't know that whoever you're getting in the back of the first round in this year's class is going to be more valuable to you than Kyler Murray if you're on a quarterback-needy Superflex team. So that's why I still lean that side. All right, and then the final trade is another quarterback trade, and this side I will take the quarterback. So Brock Purdy was traded for a 26 second-round pick, a 27 second-round pick, and then a 26 third-round pick. And voters also took Brock Purdy. 83% of voters took Purdy compared to the 17% for the picks. And this to me is pretty obvious, pretty easy. When you have the opportunity to get a starting quarterback that is pretty consistently going to be a top 15 guy. I mean, I don't think anybody thinks Brock Purdy is going to be a top 5 QB, but he's a high-end QB2, low-end QB1, somewhere in that 10 to 15 range. And that's awesome in a Superflex league. You can plug him in every week. He's going to get you some good, consistent production for the most part when he's healthy. And if you can acquire that without giving up a first-round pick, it's pretty much always going to be the quarterback side no matter what. I think if you're moving somebody like Brock Purdy, you have to get a first. Moving QBs that are on long-term contracts are not players that you should be selling for parts or pieces. Like, this is something where you got to get a relatively high-tier asset in return, and I just don't think that 2 second-round picks is quite enough. I think, this would be more of a package to go get Kyler Murray than Brock Purdy. If you wanted to go trade 2 seconds and a third for Murray, I think that feels a lot better than trading a first. And then if you want to trade a first for Brock Purdy, that feels better than this. So, if we could switch those 2 quarterbacks from each of these 2 trades that we've touched on now, I think that would work out better for everybody. But that's not how it shook out in these leagues. And I think that you have to just give an edge to the QB position in Superflex because they're just worth so much. And so that's what I'm going to go with. All right, so that is all 15 trades that I wanted to discuss. Even got a little bonus talk of that the Puka Nacua trade that went down in my home league. Also in that same league, it happened literally minutes before we recorded this show. And so I didn't have time to do a poll or anything like that. However, I'll just toss this in here for the listeners that are sticking it out to the end. A little bonus trade, if you will. But 2 contenders, 2 teams that are fighting for the playoff spot. They're right on the 5, 6, 7 edge in what is a very competitive league. And Malik Neighbors, James Cook, a 4th-round pick in 2027, and then Olamide Zaccheaus from the Bears, traded for Rashee Rice, Saquon Barkley, Devontae Adams, and Tank Bigsby. So I thought this was a really, really interesting move because it feels light for Neighbors. Obviously injured this year, but I still think Malik Neighbors is a top 5 dynasty receiver. And James Cook, to me, at this point, is probably worth more than Saquon Barkley. So, I take Neighbors over Rice, Cook over Barkley, and then I would take Devontae Adams and Bigsby over Zaccheaus in the 4th-round pick. But I think this comes down to the fact that right now, these are the teams in 6th and 7th place, and the team that is right now on the outside looking in is the team that's acquiring Neighbors. So, they have a weaker schedule. They might still sneak in the playoffs without Rice and Adams and Barkley. They get the running back upgrade, but they have Jackson Dart as well. So, they wanted to get that duo, the stack with Neighbors and Dart moving into next year. But the team, of course, now that was already in the playoffs with a JSN, Trey McBride, Justin Jefferson trio is fully loaded up and ready to go with Rice, Adams, and Barkley. So, I think I can understand it from that perspective. Certainly, you're giving up the most elite player in the deal in Neighbors, but you're acquiring some really solid win now production. And I can appreciate the aspect of going for it. And so it's just one of those bold moves that, hey, sometimes you never think that you can get a deal done with a fellow contender in a league, but sometimes if you, lay things out there, you never know what can happen. So that's what went down here. And so in terms of rest of the season, obviously you take the Rice, Adams, Barkley side. In the future, if you're a rebuilding team, I think you take the Neighbors, Cook side. But given that both of these teams are kind of in the same boat, man, that's a tough one. Because you don't know how much time left Adams has. Bigsby and Barkley together is cool, but I don't know, man. I just lean the elite player in the deal, and so I'd probably take the Neighbor side. But I think it's a fair deal, and it certainly changes how things are going to look in that league a little bit over the next couple weeks. And who knows? Both of those teams could make the playoffs. That might knock me out. I am another team fighting with these two, and I've got 2 matchups with the number 1 team in the league, and then the guy that just acquired Rice and Barkley. So I've got a tough path to the playoffs over there, whereas these two might sneak in now. So we'll see what happens, but there's a bonus trade for you. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. This has been a little bit of a longer show here, but we're back after a week off. Was down in San Antonio for work, and but now I'm back home, ready to go, and we're only a couple weeks away from the fantasy football playoffs. So, get those deals done, and I appreciate you all for tuning in. This is the Dynasty War Room Podcast, and I'm your host, Andrew Valancourt.